The following program may contain coarse language, sexual content, violence, and mature themes, so if you're under 18, back away from the television. Not for you, buddy. Viewer discretion is advised.
Izuku was punched in the face with a LE hook as he crashed into a wall. Behind him as Katsuki blasted his stomach. Burns old and new were revealed when Bakugo burned away the makeup that was covering them as Izuku slid to the ground. Standing up on wobbly feet, Izuku stares at Katsuki as the boy glowers at him in anger. Why won't the quirkless piece of shit stay down? Katsuki screamed inside his head. He then raised his right hand as he pointed it at Izuku, who looked on in confusion before the ding from earlier rang in his head as if it was a warning bell. You seem to remember what this is for. Well, since you stalked me for most of my life and gained useful information about my quirk, this baby makes sure that the explosions that I make can become as big as they can be. And what do you think will happen if I use this thing with collected sweat that can explode? Katsuki taunted as all might entered the intercoms. Young Uraraka has been captured. See? Even your teammate couldn't stay alive on your team, Katsuki said, pulling the pin. Young Bakugo, do not release that explosion. All Might said, a bit too late. It won't kill him if he dodges. Katsuki screams, as the blast is heard over his voice. Boom! Smoke covered the area where Katsuki and the cameras were located. Inside the building, Itsu was already outside and a few buildings away to hear the explosion. As the smoke was clearing, All Might gave Bakugo the strict orders to not use his other support gear in the same way unless it was a life or death situation. As Bakugo stalked the hallway, he found out that Izuku wasn't near the area where he was at and looked around the area. Don't run away from me, coward! Katsuki screamed, as he ran. As soon as the smoke and debris cleared up, the camera looked up and searched the room only to find Izuku on the ceiling of the hallway as he fell down and landed on his chest. Izuku coughed up some blood as he looked at his chest and found that there was a big gash across it as he saw blood coming down from his upper torso. Standing back up, he moved to hide inside another room as he pulled out some bandages and wrapped them around his chest. Coughing severely again, the people inside the room watching the event were shocked and horrified when they saw all the burn scars as well as the scars from multiple weapons all over his torso. But nothing prepared them to see the scars on his lower mouth as well as chin, as well as around his freckles. All Might-san, are those what I think those are? Momo asked, concerned heavily. All Might see the scars as well as he gained a frown on his face. They were not there before he started the trial. Was he using hero-grade makeup to cover his scars? Jiro asked, as she stared in shock as well as fear. What the hell happened to him? Mineta and Kaminari yelled out in clear concern. Back inside the room, Izuku looked at the blood seeping through the bandages in his chest as he looked in a mirror. Looking back at him was a 15-year-old boy who was very clearly done with life as well as dull emerald eyes that had seen the worst society had ever seen in only 15 years of being alive. Forcing himself up from the ground, Izuku looked at his wrist and found that there was only 1 minute, and 30 seconds LE on the clock. Uraraka-san, did you tell Itsu like I said in the plan? Izuku asked, as Okako replied back to him. Yeah, sorry that I got caught. Don't worry, it was all in the plan that you got caught. you lasted longer than I thought you would. You have made me proud. You may have lost the battle, but we won the war," Izuku said, as he leaped into the hallway as he went to call Katsuki to his location. In the hallway, Izuku had managed to catch the blonde bomber's attention as he immediately ran in his direction. Izuku led him down the hall and outside the building as he heard Itza running in his direction, and Izuku laughed at them both. "What's so funny, nerd?" Katsuki screamed as he attacked and was promptly knocked on his ass when Izuku kicked him in the gut before grabbing his face and slamming it into the ground only to kick him away. To Itza, "What's so funny is the fact that I sent you both on a wild goose chase. The bomb was inside the building here the whole time," Izuku said, laughing. That was when the timer for the event ended as Izuku's laughter ended as Itza stared at Izuku in shock. "The bomb was inside the building the whole time?" Itza asked, incredulous. "Nope. Me and Uraraka-san had hidden it inside the building behind ours," Izuku said, before limping towards the room where the rest of the class were waiting. He even ran into Okako on his way as she saw his scar-riddled body and ran over to him and helped him walk back to the room. Re-entering the building, everyone looked at him as if he was a completely different person. He had single-handedly outsmarted two of the class's smartest members with Okako. But they had thought that it was Okako that made the plans. They didn't have to know that it came from Izuku. Now that the event is over, who is the MVP of the first battle? All Might asked, curiously. Momo immediately raised her hand and gave her explanation as to why Itza was the MVP. And had All Might not listened in on Izuku's plan from the beginning, she would have been correct. "You are close, young Yayorozu. But you are incorrect," All Might said, as Momo slumped to the ground, in shock at her being wrong. "It was Midoriya," a quiet but blunt voice said. Everyone looked over and found Shoto Todoroki had spoken as he moved up to the front. "Why do you say that, young Todoroki?" All Might asked. He was going to say that it was Uraraka, but if she wasn't in Shoto's opinion, then he would hear Shoto out. "From what I saw in the battle training, Midoriya had made the plan to move the bomb to the building behind them. Uraraka hadn't even made the mouth movements to give her 2 cents and followed through with his plan. But let's not forget the fact that he had made sure to plan that Uraraka would get captured as well. Everything that happened save the extremely large explosion that was way overboard from Bakugo was planned by Midoriya up until now," Todoroki said, and All Might was now seriously thinking that this kid was joking. "Are you sure that Midoriya should be the MVP?" All Might asked, curiously, only to receive a nod from Shoto. "Shoto's right, Midoriya had told me the plan. And I followed it to the letter of his words. And he knew that Bakugo-san would chase him since the boy seems to have a sheer massive hatred for him," Uraraka said, as All Might lost all composure before Izuku spoke. "Just take the MVP position. I am going to become an underground hero anyway. I don't want to have the spotlight," Izuku said, as he walked away down the hall. Okako followed behind him to make sure the boy made it to the nurse's voice, unaware of what she was making some girls gossip about their relationship. "All right with Eureka as the MVP, let's begin the next battle. All Might said, as he smiled at the class. Izuku was trembling as he walked down the hall as Okako caught up with him fast enough to catch him from a fall. As blood seeped from his wound on the front of his body, Okako lied him up with her quirk and rushed him to the nurse's ois. They arrived before the STA bots could leave and jump, scaring the poor nurse inside. Jesus! Will you too? Just get him on the bed immediately. Recovery Girl said, completely serious when seeing Izuku's extremely hurt form. As Recovery Girl removed the bandages on Izuku's chest, she noticed all the other older scars all over his chest as she grimaced in pain as well as sorrow. I need to have some time alone in order to help the boy. Can you head to Nizu's ois in order to get him to come here and bring your homeroom teacher Izawa as well? Recovery Girl asked as Okako nodded immediately. As soon as the girl had left the room, Izuku opened his eyes to find Recovery Girl standing over him and stitching his chest up. You are going to tell me what happened to your body, young man? I cannot believe that one of our own students came here with scars, telling a horrific story. Recovery Girl said, as she grumbled about abused children. Izuku kept quiet since he wouldn't tell her about his past. He was too uncomfortable with authority figures, especially since past experiences would make them allow the bad things to continue to happen. It wasn't until about 9 minutes had passed that Izawa was the one to show up with Principal Nizu hiding in his scarf. They looked at the scar-riddled boy in front of them sleeping as Recovery Girl had sat on a desk in the corner of the room with multiple images of Izuku's scar-riddled form. Standing near her, Nizu slipped down from Izawa's shoulder and landed on the desk to look at the papers on the table. He looked at each and every report from Izuku's past physician as well as the school nurse from previous schools, as they all told one thing. Izuku was abused in his past, and nobody even cared to get him the help he needed. It was here that Izuku had woken up from the induced sleep from energy deprivation from Recovery Girl's quirk had given him. Izuku Midoriya. What the hell happened? Nizu said, as his fur bristled at Izuku. Inko Midoriya was a wonderful woman as well as the perfect mother to Izuku. She had been taking care of him as well as supporting his dreams of becoming a hero ever since he was announced Quirkless to the masses. So for her to hear about the fact that her son had scars on his back as well as whole body, she was immediately sent into a spiral of worry and fear. She knew that he never had scars whenever she had saw him without a shirt or pants. She had even made sure that he never used makeup. But to hear that he was using hero-grade makeup in order to hide his scars from her as well as those around him, she left her job in order to find out what the hell was going on with her son. She made it to the school within a few minutes of being told about her son's complicated condition as she made it onto the school grounds, being met by his homeroom teacher Izawa Shota. I take it that you're Inko Midoriya, he asked, tired as Izuku had told her. Yes, my name is Inko Midoriya. Can you tell me what happened? Inko asked worriedly. There was a battle training exercise today, and things had gone wrong. The moment your son and his friend were placed against the other, Izawa said, as he led the mother around the school grounds. They continued their conversation as he told her about the fact that her son Had hero-grade makeup on his body that covered scars that were on him, and when they arrived in the nurse's ois, they saw Izuku sleeping on the cot in the room. Looking at the shocked teachers as well as nurse in the room, Inko knew that this was not something they knew about. Walking over to her son, she placed her hand over his curls, and the teachers and Nizu saw how unconsciously Izuku leaned into her touch. I am sorry, mom," Izuku mumbled in his sleep. Inko looked closer at her son's eyes as well as his face. She saw the scars of a muzzle having been placed over his mouth and nose. She moved the blanket slowly as Izuku turned over to lean into the warmth that covered his body. As he did so, she saw all the scars on his back in the shape of burns, cuts, old bruises, and even some weird writing on his back. She pulled out some glasses and leaned closer to her son's back in order to get a better read of the words, and she immediately placed the blanket back over her son. Izuku placed a bucket near her as she vomited inside the bucket itself. Before moving to styly sit on one of the chairs nearby. "Mrs. Midoriya, do you know of anyone who could have done this horrible thing to your son?" Nizu asked, concerned for her reaction. "And no. He stopped me from helping him with bullies when the school system prevented us from speaking up about it," Inko said, looking at the ground filled with horror as well as sadness. "If it's any solace, he probably wanted your best wishes at heart," Izuku said, as he looked at the woman. "I know, he had always worried over my health, especially since it declined over the years since his diagnosis of being quirkless," Inko said, as recovery girl had walked over with some test results. "I took the liberty to check his blood work and x-rays again in order to make sure that he didn't have a quirk, and the tests came back positive that he didn't have a quirk. But I should let you know that the second joint in the pinky toe has been disproven on so many accounts in the past for quirklessness," RG said, as Inko stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Izuku's primary physician told us that the trademark sign for quirklessness was the fact that he had the second toe joint in his pinky toe. Inko asked, confused and concerned. That was incorrect in his hypothesis, but in his blood work is where his quirk genes will be truly shown, although when he told you your son was quirkless, he was correct. He based it on false information," RG said, as she walked in order to tend to her sleeping patient. "Mrs. Midoriya, we would like to inform you that you are within your rights in order to ask for a lawyer for your trial of your son," Nizu said, as he stared at Inko. "What are you talking about?" Inko asked, confused. "Well, the person who nearly killed your son as well as put those scars on his body is in this very school at the moment. Although he didn't place all of the scars on him, he was a major ender," Nizu said, as Inko remembered the burn scars and tears began to pour out. "It's Katsuki, isn't it?" Inko asked, a little broken inside. "Yes, unfortunately it is Katsuki Bakugo, he placed those burn scars on him. But there is more concerning information that we need to talk about," Nizu said, as he pointed to a television and showed a certain camera from Aldera Middle School. Izuku was inside his dreams of his past, and he was walking a small trail, following one of the people he trusted with his entire life. Katsuki Bakugo. The boy was boisterous, arrogant, determined, as well as very persistent in how he did the things he had done over the years. Izuku had leaned over to the boy as the young man had been his rock. Whenever things had become too hard to think about in the past, when they were friends and Izuku was thinking about his old friend because of what had happened in the battle trial that day. He was nearly killed by Bakugo today, and from what it looked like, he wouldn't have had cared even a little bit about his seemly death. Even if it was by his hand, but Izuku knew better, having his record destroyed because of Izuku's death wouldn't even be the worst thing that he would do to retaliate. He would go to the ends of the earth in order to make sure that Izuku took his own life without his say. But in this dream, everything was completely wrong about Katsuki. It showed him scheming behind his back, bullying him from a perspective from an outsider. Not only that, but it showed Katsuki in a light that he never looked at before. Katsuki was more than just a bully. He was a low-tier villain if he had to think about it now. In the past, Katsuki had used his quirk against Izuku many times and never got in trouble, but the problems that he caused for everyone else was placed on Izuku's records in order to make sure that he couldn't enter a hero school. But now he was on a roof standing before the number one hero himself, All Might. The man was emaciated, as well as a skeleton in looks, but the powerful deep blue eyes had been staring at him for a while. About your question about a quirkless hero, I should think not. Don't take this with a grain of salt, but from my perspective, I have one of the most powerful quirks in history, and I was reduced to this by a villain who had been strong enough to damage me. So I would feel like I am sending you to your death if I were to tell you to become a quirkless hero. I feel like it would be on me if you died and your loved ones without you. So, in order to keep you safe for your family, to answer your question about a quirkless hero, don't think I will encourage it. In fact, I will tell you to just try for a new dream. It's alright to dream, kid, just make sure it's realistic. All Might said, walking down the staircase of the building. Izuku was on the roof as he thought about the past that he endured, not to mention the words of All Might, and he couldn't help but think that maybe his dreams of becoming a hero were just that, dreams. But then his dreams had shown him at the UA entrance exams and saving Yurika-san from being crushed by the zero-pointer and getting her to safety, as well as teaming up with her in taking on the team of Itsu-san and Kiken, and he couldn't help but laugh in his dream as he remembered that they beat Kiken and Itsu-san. Looking around the space, Izuku stood up from his position of lying on the ground as he felt a sensation of someone rubbing the top of his curls. And with that sensation he leaned into the touch as it reminded him of his mother. Looking down at his body, he saw many scars from his past, and he couldn't help but think about how he looked horrible from a perspective of his own. He could only think that he was ugly to others, since most people don't like those or heroes who were scarred from their past. He had no friends, no family other than his mother. He disowned his own father since the man never visited and divorced his own mother, and the woman he was slowly falling for. He couldn't take it anymore as he started to cry to himself in his dream. Why is she keeping me near her? I didn't do anything to earn her presence. I really didn't. So why is she staying near me if she doesn't like me? Izuku screamed in his mindscape. Years ago, when he was a child. If you told him that his hero complex would probably be his undoing in the future, he would tell you that he would make sure that he was safe himself. But now he would probably laugh at your face and ask, "What took you so long to figure that out? Was it because I don't care for myself like I care for others?" Izuku was reliving his harshest memories from his mind, and he couldn't help but think that he did something in a past life that garnered this much hatred from his peers. He never sat near his classmates when it was lunchtime, as he steered clear of them as well as the lunchroom in favor of increasing his mind as well as strength with his teachers. He was extremely lonely and never had a friend since he was literally 4 years old, and the little 4-year-old in his mind had been slowly reaching out to the surface of his mind and showing his true personality to the others in class itself. And it was a clear distinction, as Izuku in class was more outgoing than he was talking to them during any part of the day that wasn't in class. He was extremely introverted as well as very skittish towards others, more so than Koji Koda, their shy and timid classmate. So for Izuku to think that nobody cares for him except his mother really shows how much society had failed him in terms of keeping his spirits high, especially a certain number one hero. He still remembers when he found out that his mother secretly had lovers coming over when he was at school. She was extremely touch-starved, like he was. And he knew that since he himself was touch-starved, he could only rely on his mother for that, but he really didn't know how much he craved to be touched by someone else when Okako had grabbed his hand during the exercise when they moved the bomb. When he remembered the touch she gave him with her hand and held it, he remembered how she was looking shocked at him as he never let go of her hand while they went to hide it. But when he told her that he was touch-starved earlier in their planning, she immediately told him that if he wishes to hold hands that she could do that for him, and he refused vehemently, not ready at all for that. But overall, he cared for her opinion and made sure that her contact information was saved on his phone just in case. With Inko, she was currently screaming at All Might as the man revealed himself to be the number one hero that Izuku talked about to her, crushing his dream, but enough to completely break him. Do you have any idea as to why he asked you that singular question? Inko screamed at All Might. He told me that he wanted to know if a quirkless person could ever be a hero like me. I told him no, because I personally don't think we should send someone like that here. A villain who could tear him in two with just a flick of his finger. All Might retorted as Inko bared back on him once again. Did it ever occur to you that he was in the condition to leave him on a Ruup air being told to kill himself? Inko yelled again, causing the man to look at her in shock. I never knew that he was told to kill himself, All Might said, as he told her he had no idea that something like that ever happened. At school he is given red spider lilies every day, and you are telling me that in your moment of focus on cleaning up his supplies that you didn't even see any red spider lilies in his backpack? Inko asked, as All Might then mentioned finding some and told her that he thought her son was going to give them to someone he knew later on that day. Inko was furious with that answer, as she basically told him everything he needed to know about the quirkless population's statistics on their mortality rate. And ere being shown the statistics, he was feeling even worse than he was before, but that paled in comparison to the fact that Izuku was being abused by his peers and schoolmates as well as teachers. That explains his current behavior towards his classmates and teachers. Nizu suddenly said aloud. What? Inko asked. He has been completely avoiding most of our teachers that are in close proximity as well as his classmates when they were both in class as well as they are leaving school. In fact, in his training exercise, he had held hands with a young girl, young Urarika. Nizu said, as Inko stared at him in awe. Is she alright? Is she treating my son okay? Inko asked, as Nizu looked at her with mirth. She was treating your son like a human being, and in fact treats him as if he was a friend, although she really wishes that he sat with her at lunch. Nizu said, as Inko nodded her head. Not good experiences with teachers and students would do that. To him, he really isn't trustful of others, especially authority figures. Except for me. Inko said, as Nizu nodded. They continued for the next hour talking about what would happen to the old schools that Izuku went to as well as Bakugo when the time was right. All in all, Bakugo would not know what was coming for him when the time came. 'Cause the moment he will be hit with it, he will be so unprepared, that he will go ballistic. Izuku woke up in the room as he was surprised by the fact, he was all alone inside of it. He left the UA building in order to make sure that he could make it home before his mother would worry about him. God forbid him get grounded for being late on returning home from his school without his mother's knowledge. He had been trying his best to increase the amount of time he spent with her since he had been training on how to become an underground hero since he was around 9 years of age. He walked up to his apartment's door, and as he was about to open it, he heard the sound of a very secret conversation being made. I will make sure that your son is safe at our school, Mrs. Midoriya. You have my word on that. I never thought that young Bakugo would release that kind of an attack inside of training. A voice called out, as it was similar to who he talked to about 10 months ago. Inside his brain he thought about the conversation he had with the specific hero he remembered from 10 months ago, and he was saddened by how he failed his teacher. He was trying to show that he couldn't be taken lightly, and all that happened was that he was taken not as seriously as he should have been. Then the words from Katsuki and All Might rang inside his head from all those months ago, all those months of pain and suffering at the hands of a bully who he desperately hoped would return to being his friend. If you want a quirk so bad, how about you just head to a roof and jump? Oh, maybe you will get a quirk in your next life. Katsuki said, as he caused some explosions in his hands. Young man, I cannot on good conscience send a young quirkless man out into a fight knowing that he will lose. I won't sugarcoat it, as it is going to be incredibly tough for you to become a hero, period. Without the HPSC stopping you from attaining your license. But at least I can have on my conscience that I tried to steer you to a safer job for you to make into a good dream. It's alright to dream, kid, just make sure that those dreams you have are at least realistic. All Might said, walking away. As Izuku was reliving a memory in his mind, he never noticed how the front door of his home had opened up and was revealed to be his homeroom teacher, Izawa Shota. As the man looked down at Izuku, he had noticed a faraway look in his eyes, as if he was remembering something that happened a long time ago. Midoriya, he asked, only to not receive an answer. Midoriya? Aizawa called out again, this time causing Izuku to leave his train of thought. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku asked, confused. I'm sorry, about what happened in your class today? That support item wasn't supposed to be a part of Bakugo's hero suit. It should have been decommissioned by the HPSC for how destructive it could be to the area he is supposed to be patrolling, Aizawa said, as he placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder and definitely didn't miss the flinch from the boy. Sai, I know that your past is horrible, but you need to talk to Hound Dog about it in order to find some kind of closure. I hope you will get the help you need. Problem child. I hope you know that we heroes as UA are trustworthy, Aizawa said, as he left Izuku on his front doorstep as he left to patrol the area. That night, Izuku couldn't sleep. He had been trying to think about what his homeroom teacher had told him about seeking help and decided that before he makes it to homeroom, that he would see Hound Dog. If there was anyone he should trust, it was the school's counselor, someone who could ask him the questions as well as give him the answers he really needed at this point in time. So attempting to fall asleep once again, he was able to do this before he woke up at around 5 in the morning and leaving his room to do his morning run. About 15 minutes of running, Izuku returned to his home and found his mother preparing some breakfast for him. Morning, sweetie. I know that you want to keep everything that has happened to you secret. But I want you to know that you can trust me with hearing what happened over the last 10 years. You know that, right? Inko asked, worriedly. I know that. I just don't want you and Auntie M. Mitsuki to lose the friendship you each have because of me. Izuku said, sitting down at the table. Well, you have 3 hours before school starts, so you can tell me what happened, Inko asked, as she wanted to make sure that her son could answer and know that he wasn't being forced. And it didn't take long before the dam broke as he told her everything that had happened to him over the course of 10 long years of abuse, mental torment, the abuse from his teachers as well as peers, how Katsuki called him a name meaning useless, to Katsuki using his quirk against him at any point of any day possible, all the way to the slime villain incident. As well as what happened before he met All Might between him and Katsuki, and to hear that from Izuku made her heart break from how much pain her son has been in just to make sure that she never found out. How he had made sure that as soon as they were threatened with the police in order to stop them from making complaints about his previous school. How he hid any and all burns, cuts, bruises, as well as markings on his body just to make sure she doesn't worry more about him than needed. As he was leaving out the front door earlier than usual, Inko walked over to him and gave him a hug as she cried over his shoulder. I'm sorry for not being able to help you when you were hurt so much by them. If you ever need to talk to me again, please be sure to tell me. Okay, Inko asked, as Izuku hugged her back. I will, Mom, I got to go, Izuku said, leaving home in order to talk to Hound Dog that morning. Izuku arrived at the school counselor's office as he knocked on the door. As he heard the girl come in from the other side of the door, he opened it to find Hound Dog preparing his voice. Hello there, Midoriya, I apologize for not being prepared for a student to come at the moment. Is there anything you need from me? Hound Dog asked, curiously. I've been told to talk to you about anything that has been bothering me. Izuku said, entering the room slowly. Well, you can take a seat on the couch nearby, and I will sit down at the recliner across from it. Hound Dog said, as he grabbed a notebook. As they sat on the couch and recliner, Hound Dog got his notebook steady for what was going to happen. So is there anything you wish for me to answer? Hound Dog asked, recording their conversation on his audio recorder. What does it mean to have a FF friend? Izuku asked, as he stared at Hound Dog. Can you clarify why you are asking me this? Midoriya, Hound Dog asked. I've been following Bakugo ever since I was 4. And I was wanting to know if the relationship I have with him is toxic or not. I know that he says that we're not friends anymore, that much is obvious now more than ever. But can you tell me what a friend is supposed to do for theirs? Izuku asked, as he stared into the round eyes of Hound Dog. Well, if I remember correctly, a friend is supposed to be there for you no matter what the situation calls for. They are to hang out with you, defend you when they know that you did nothing wrong, as well as go around places as you talk about your days with them. From what I can remember from my time as a youngster, Hound Dog said, as Izuku became a little more skittish as he quietly questioned once more. Do they hurt you? Do they wish for you to die? Izuku asked, as Hound Dog looked at Izuku with a different kind of emotion. Can you tell me the situation where this friend of yours hurt you as well as wished for your death? Hound Dog questioned, very alarmed by his skittishness as well as kept himself from growling. He told me that air school on the D-day of the slime villain incident. But for the first part of your Q question, he has been hurting me ever since I was 4. Izuku said, as Hound Dog immediately stood up, causing the boy to flinch hard. He had even placed his arms and hands in a defensive posture in order to protect himself from any and all harm. Young man, that is not how a friend should behave. A friend is supposed to make sure that you are all right in both mind and body. They should never wish for you to be dead, nor should they assault you for whatever reason they wish. Hound Dog said, as he sat down next to Izuku so as to let the boy slowly exit his defensive posture. So him telling me to kill myself 10 months ago was wrong? Izuku asked. Yes, it is wrong to say that to anyone. Is there a reason why he told you this? Hound Dog asked, restraining his anger and fury. Because I am quirkless, Izuku said, as Hound Dog released a sigh. Let me guess, everyone around you never stopped him or joined in on your beatdown? Hound Dog asked, as he watched Izuku nod his head. Well, I will need to make sure that you are not thinking thoughts of suicide. Have you been getting thoughts of cutting your own body in order to feel pain? Hound Dog asked, concerned. And no. I've never thought about that. That wouldn't be heroic of me, Izuku said, as Hound Dog slowly moved his paw over Izuku's head and ruled his hair. It's alright to show weakness, young man. It shows that you have the strength to show someone who isn't someone who you love that you can be hurt inside. How long has it been since you were ever treated like a human being? Hound Dog asked. Not since I was 4. Izuku said, as Hound Dog sighed in sadness. Head over to your homeroom class. Just make sure that you can focus on your classes for today. From what I hear, Izawa-san will be taking your class on a field trip. Hound Dog said, as Izuku nodded his head. As the boy left the room, Hound Dog had called his boss, intent on telling him about what he had heard from the boy himself. This boy would be getting some justice if he has anything to say about it, and nobody is going to stop him if Bakugo tries what he did the other day from tearing him limb from limb. Entering his classroom, Izuku had sat down in his seat as he focused on his class assignments for the day. Everyone was talking about how there was a group of reporters at the front gates as they were hoping to get an interview with All Might. As soon as the rest of the class trickled in, Izawa had entered the classroom. As he first looked at Izuku, who was more relaxed in his class for the first time since he started. Sighing in relief that Izuku had talked to Hound Dog at least today, he talked about what they were doing today in order to continue their day. He even told the class that there will be a field trip today for their heroics class today, and that they should be prepared to wear their hero costumes. As it would turn out, classes at UA was not as heroic as most people would think about, since there was math, science, language arts, as well as modern art, history and others. But as the class were eating lunch for the day, one of the girls noticed that their resident green bean wasn't present in the lunchroom. And it was a brown-haired girl who had been keeping an eye on the boy, as she had noticed that he kept his distance from others in the class. She decided to leave the cafeteria in order to find him, and sure enough, she found him standing outside of the school, as he was eating some of his homemade lunch that he brought from home. Hey! She called out, somehow jump-scaring the poor boy. As he jumped about 10 feet in the air, the girl ran over and apologized for scaring him so badly. It's fine, no harm done. I think I will move to a new location if you were wanting to sit here, Izuku said, as he got up to leave before his arm was grabbed. Hey, I don't want you to leave. But if I am making you uncomfortable, then I will leave, okay? The girl asked, as Izuku nodded before sitting back down. So, why are you out here? There is the cafeteria for a reason, you know, the girl said, as Izuku shook his head. Don't want to go there, otherwise I will be. Never mind, Izuku said, stewing his face. Are you afraid of the others in the cafeteria? The girl asked, as Izuku looked at her with fear in his eyes. Just as he was about to sit up, the girl introduced herself. My name is Yurarika Okako, what's yours? Okako asked, as she watched as Izuku slowly sat back down and took deep breaths. My name is Midoriya Izuku. And I am aiming for being a U Underground H hero, Izuku said, as she looked at him with a smile. I'm aiming for becoming a rescue hero like 13, Okako said, as Izuku came out of his shell a little. 13. She is the best hero for rescue operations. I have a notebook about her quirk and how she has used her quirk to save hundreds if not thousands of civilians. Mutter Izuku gushed as Okako looked at him with a smile on her face. As soon as Izuku heard her giggling. He stopped his muttering as he looked at her as she caught her breath. "Oh man, I never knew that you'd be a hero nerd." "That's a good thing though," Okako said, as she finished laughing. Before seeing his face faltering at her laughter and fixing her answer to him. I've been told that my muttering was creepy as well as scary. Not to mention annoying, Izuku said, as he looked away. "I personally think that it comes with your personality. It just needs to be brought out," Okako said, as Izuku looked away from her. "Too bright," Izuku thought as Okako smiled at him. It was here that they were about to continue their conversation when the school's alarm system went off as reporters flooded the front gates from a dusted wall. That hole in the wall seems to have been disintegrated from the outside. Questions 4. Later. "We need to get back to class, Uraraka-san," Izuku said, as he put his food away as he pulled Okako away from the area. The event of the destroyed wall, Izuku and his class were on a bus heading to the USJ for rescue training. Izuku had been a little hyped about what was going to happen as the other students started to talk about quirks. "Midoriya-chan, can I ask you a question?" Azui-san asked, as Izuku looked over at her. "Sure, Azui-chan," Izuku said, before Azui talked again. "Call me Tsu, and what will you be doing there? I mean no offense, but you don't have a quirk that would allow you to do the things we can," Tsu said, as she stared at him. "None taken. I learned how to do martial arts from a teacher in downtown Musudafu, but I want the experience of rescue training if I happen across a devastating event that caused people to be trapped in rubble or lost in the woods or out on sea," Izuku said, as Tsu nodded her head. "Bastard will probably be the damsel in distress for this class," a rough voice called out from the back of the bus. "I'll be honest there, Bakugo, your personality will not gain you any followers," Kaminari said, as he laughed at Bakugo's face. "You wanna go dunce face?" Katsuki screamed. "Well, at least, something is proving that he won't be a massively popular hero," Tsu said as Izuku looked at the scene with shock and awe. "Kaken's being teased. This is a new thing for me to experience," Izuku thought to himself. "Don't even get me started on his quirkless ass," Katsuki called out, as Izuku sighed in disappointment. "Even when we're inside UA, none of the bullying will stop," Izuku thinks to himself. Okako, who had saw his look, stared at Bakugo with a glare that could kill a lion. "What the fuck do you want, pink cheeks?" he called out. "You should really learn how to be nice to your peers, you never know when they might kick your ass," Okako said, as Katsuki went out on a tangent against those who were quirkless. As everyone listened to him list things that quirkless weren't capable of, Okako watched as Izuku curled more and more into a small ball as everyone else noticed his behavior as well. "Shut up. We're here," Izuku said, as they arrived at their location. Standing on the bus, Izuku looked at the USJ with a mirth in his eyes as he pulled out a notebook from thin air to write a document about it. From his personal experience. From the looks in a sketch of it to the person who was coming down the stairs towards them, and now that he thinks about it, the only one who should be here was the pro heroine. 13. As he takes notice of the heroine, he noticed that it was 13 as Okako gushed about her favorite heroine. She also talked about how her quirk was used for any and all rescues that she remembered from her childhood. Yes, and my quirk has the ability to kill, 13 said, with an ominous tone. My quirk has the power to tear you apart limb from limb if you are pulled into its pull of gravity, 13 said, as Izuku asked where All Might was. Especially since he was supposed to be here based on the teacher's tone of voice. As they were about to continue with their plans of their field trip there, the power went out of the building as a swirling mass of purple showed up in the plaza. Yuame Izuku-sensei. Was this supposed to happen? Izuku asked, as his teacher looked over at him. This was not planned, get to the bus and evacuate, Izuku said, as he pulled out his yellow goggles and covered his eyes. It was when he left to fight the villains that Izuku noticed how he was completely outnumbered by the villains. Too much. There are too many villains, Izuku mumbled as Tinya had noticed him not following them and pulled him along. It was here that a new villain blocked their way out of the building and to the outside world. Hello golden eggs of the hero course at UA Academy. I am Kurojiri, and I am here to make sure the villains here kill you all, he said, as he prepared to send everyone away. Not yet. Both Kirishima and Bakugo said, as they launched at the villain. As they phased through his fog, 13 ran over to attack as the villain continued to monologue. Well done for golden eggs, now disperse, he called out, as 13 made her presence known. Not if I have anything to say about it, she called out, as she used her quirk to pull him into her black hole. As expected of pro heroine 13. But I have things to do, the villain said, as he made a portal behind her, causing her to break her suit's back open and lacerate her back with her own quirk. Once that was done, he dispersed some of the students in the area and into the USJ so they could be killed by the villains in the area. Izuku would fall into one of the portals, and he would find himself falling towards a mountainous area of the USJ. Izuku fell towards the mountain zone as he noticed that his support items as well as gear was made even more useful for the area that he was in. Looking around himself, he found himself with two of his classmates, namely Momo Yayorozu and Kyokijiro. Looking at them, they ran over to him as they fret over him, knowing that he was quirkless. Izuku shakes them as he tells them that there are villains that they have to defeat. As the villains in the zone move forward, they notice how Izuku steps in front of the girls as they get into battle stances. Well, what do we have here? Might as well kill the boy before getting to the ladies. Kill the green bean and fuck the girls, one of the muscular villains called out. He barely got 15 meters to them when he was smacked right in the face with a long STA that was in the hands of Izuku. I will not allow you to take their chastities, Izuku proclaims as he fights the entire crew of villains. The villains attack Izuku as he goes on the offensive. The girls join him at his side as they team up, making new combination moves with one another as they take them out. It takes an hour as they are fighting the villains one by one, and they were overwhelming them in terms of sheer numbers. Izuku's strength was about to run out, when he noticed how one of the villains was a young boy with balls for hair in the color of purple. Noticing his leering looks at Yaoyorozu, he runs over to him and without the pervert noticing his presence, ere knocking out the pervert, Izuku tied him up against the wall as he looked to his classmates in order to discern whether or not they were injured. Walking away from the spot where the boy was sitting, Izuku saw what was happening as Momo was topless and without a bra, and he sat down near them but not looking in their direction. "So you're not going to look at us?" Kyoka's voice called out. Turning his lei towards the girl, he saw that she was standing in front of Momo as the girl had some paper surrounding herself. "Nope, that wouldn't be what a young man such as myself should do. Not that. You aren't beautiful girls, but we are in a rather dangerous situation, and we can't get distracted at the moment," Izuku retorted as he looked at the surrounding area. Once Momo said that she was ready, Izuku stood up as he felt movement in the ground as he jumped back as a new villain who had a look of pure hatred in his eyes, jumping from the ground. "You're all supposed to be dead. What happened to all the villains here?" he cried out in anger. Izuku noticed how the man sparked a little bit with electricity as he got more and more pissed. And Izuku made up a plan. "Momo, pull up a rubber blanket," Izuku said, as he stared at his new opponent. He was really thankful that he got the rest he needed in order to recuperate to fight more villains. "Oh, so you think that you can fight me? What even is your quirk, little man?" the villain asked, as he got closer to Izuku. "Truth is, I don't have a need for one," Izuku said, pulling pepper spray out and hitting the man in the eyes with the spray. As the man swiped around the area in order to land a hit on Izuku, his eyes watered from the amount of pepper spray that was in his eyes and launched some electricity towards the girls. The rubber stopped the girls from being electrocuted, but Izuku didn't stop his assault of the villain in front of himself, and he climbed on top of the villain's back as he placed his arms around the man's neck, blocking the man's airways from being capable of being used for a while. The man threw his arms and tried to hit Izuku his back. In the main plaza, Izawa Shota was not having a fun time. This was supposed to be a trip where his students could learn how to become great rescue heroes should the need arise, but these villains just had to come in and prevent a nice trip to the unforeseen simulation joint and turn it into a nightmare. There seemed to be no end for the number of villains in the area as he took out villain air villain, and more just seemed to spawn out of nowhere. It seems like Eraserhead is being able to take out our trash mobs like they aren't anything. Looks like we need to make sure that he can't continue on anymore. "Nomua," the man-child said, as he ordered the monster onto him. Shota couldn't even get a word out of his mouth before he was slammed into the ground, and everything went black for but a moment. The last thing he could see before seeing black was how Izuku was seemingly running towards him, with a fearful look on his face. Okako Uraraka, she was a student of Class 1A as she had befriended most of the class already, and the one who was next on her radar was Izuku Midoriya. He was a loner type of person, and he really looked like he could use some friends, not that he didn't have any of his own. But it just looked like he was always sad in his eyes. She was separated from the rest of the class as she was LE with 13, Shoji, Mina, Sato, and Kota as they were trying to stop the bleeding from 13's back. We need to get her out of here, Okako called out, and as she got closer to the edge of the stairs, she saw that some of her classmates were coming to the plaza. She had seen the looks of fear on their faces as they ran towards the stairs, and the look she was surprised to see was determination from of all people Midoriya. He looked at where Izuku Sensei was fighting and watched as the man took down multiple enemies at the same time as he brought the villains' numbers down to only 3 as the rest were knocked out. Almost as soon as the blue-haired man's voice was heard, their teacher was on the ground as Okako saw Izuku running towards the monster villain with eyes wide with fear and worry. Izuku was running towards the plaza with Momo and Jiro as they had taken care of all villains in their area and were heading to lighten the load for their teacher to rest a little. Once they arrived at the main plaza of the USJ, they noticed that most if not all of the villains except the main 3 had been defeated as Izuku was looking at the 3 now. Their words couldn't be heard, but Izuku read the lips of the man looking at their teacher, and he turned over to the monster that was as muscular as All Might himself. As soon as the last word left the man's mouth, Izuku saw the monstrosity disappear behind their teacher and slam him into the ground. Running before his mind could keep up with him, Izuku ran towards the creature with only one thing on his mind. Make sure that his sensei can survive. Nobody would remember a quirkless freak who made it into Yui Academy. For all they knew, he cheated his way into the school. As soon as he got close to the monstrous being, he pulled out a knife as he engaged the monster in battle. It was faster than he was as it landed light, but heavy blows to Izuku's body, but Izuku wouldn't back down. He bought enough time for Momo and Jiro to climb up the stairs, as he pulled out a knife that he hid on himself for any occasion that he could bring it out in emergencies. He grabbed the blade and gripped it tightly as he somehow erased his presence from the field and everyone looking into the plaza. He walked calmly as he approached the creature as it stood ramrod straight, looking around the place for him. Climbing up the creature, he pointed his knife at the creature's brain as he slammed into the brain matter over and over again as it screeched in pain. Izuku took all his frustrations out on the monster as he remembered everything from his past, all the bullying, suicide baiting, the beatdowns, the cheating lies, everything that made him inhuman to the others. He even took out his rage on how his father left him when he was little and couldn't be blamed for what happened to him genetically. As soon as he felt that the monster wasn't moving, he returned his presence to everyone in the area as they saw him standing over the corpse of the muscular villain. How did you beat my Nomu? The young man called out. I stabbed it in the brain multiple times to the point it couldn't regenerate. If it had that quirk. Simple problem, simple enough answer, Izuku said, as he looked over at the villains with blood all over his body. I will fucking kill you, the young man said, running towards Izuku. He got into a fighting stance when the young man was a few meters in front of him, and Izuku jutted out his leg to trip the man onto the ground. It worked a little as the man stumbled around as Izuku launched an array of martial arts that he learned on the internet. They were sloppy, but with bullies attacking you from all angles, Izuku got good at knowing when an attack was coming as he dodged all attacks from the blue-haired man-child. How are you dodging me? The man-child screamed in anger and fury. You are telegraphing your attacks, I thought you knew how to fight. But it seems like you just can't handle losing to a battle or a child. Izuku taunts as he kicked the blue-haired young man in the gut, sending him back to his supporter. What kind of quirk are you using in order to do this? He screamed, as his subordinate appeared near him. Tamura Shigaraki. We need to leave. The Noma was defeated. If he was defeated by a mere child, then all might would have been capable of destroying it. The wispy man said, as Izuku straightened up. Tamura Shigaraki, that is a horrible name. Izuku said, as the now named Tamura stared at him in righteous fury. What did you say about my name? He screamed as Izuku walked closer to the man-child. Tamura Shigaraki is a horrible name, and it is the name of a young man from the dawn of quirks. A young man who was ill as well as weak compared to his brother. All for one. Izuku said, as he stared at the villain. Are you the spy we put into Yui? The man-child asked, curiously. Nope, but that all but confirms my suspicions about the man's survival. Izuku said, as he looked at the warper. If you're going to leave, you better do it now before the heroes get here. I don't have the strength nor stamina to take you both down. But if the heroes get here before my death by your hands, then you will be caught. Izuku threatens as Tamura stared at him in anger and mock fury. I will return. And you are going to die by my hand. Shigaraki called out, as Izuku watched as they both leave the USJ. Moving over to his teacher, Izuku pulled the man into his arms as he stared at the sleeping man. Placing his fingers on the man's neck, he felt for a pulse when his teacher spoke to him. Not dead yet, Izuku said, as Izuku nodded his head and brought him to the top of the stairs. Izuku, what the hell did you just do? Okako said, as she helped him pull Eraserhead out of the USJ. I erased my presence, it was something I had to learn in middle school. Izuku said, as he focused on the task of bringing his sensei outside. It wasn't long before All Might had shown up. Really late, as he looked a little winded to Izuku, although he knew what the man was really doing. He had been trying to keep himself from going over the time limit he has with his hero form, but he hasn't said a single thing to the school about his and Izuku's backstory. As All Might looks to Izuku and Okako, Izuku points his head inside the building as the hero runs inside to look for the other students. Sitting Izuku down on the road, Izuku pulled the man's head onto his lap as he gave the man a lap pillow for his head. He must have a really bad headache, was Izuku's only thoughts on the matter. What happened between you and Shigaraki, sensei? Izuku asked. Was that his name? Izuku asked, concerned. Yes, his subordinate said his name out loud. Did he order the monster to attack you? Izuku asked. Yes. He was tired of me destroying his mobs, Izuku said, as Izuku sighed in anger. Of course, he is a gamer, Izuku muttered to himself. Okako was surprised that Izuku was this close to their teacher. Maybe it was because of the fact that they both fight Quirkless. One because of his Quirkless diagnosis, and the other because he doesn't have a strength inhibitor to his own quirk. Can we talk later? Midoriya Okako asked, as Izuku looked over at her. why we should really be seeing our own parents in order to let it all sink in that we were attacked. Izuku said, as he looked at the girl. He had been really skittish with her lately, and she had noticed his behavior towards her. So she had made it her mission to get close to him, as close as possible without him even becoming paranoid, as well as scared of her presence near him. She knew from their first experience that he doesn't do well with others, especially if they're named Katsuki Bakugo. At first, she thought Katsuki was just a hard ass who just didn't care for people's names and would earn the right for him to call you such when you earn his respect. But from the way he treated Midoriya, that was wrong, and she wanted to get closer to him, but he just wouldn't let her get close. I need to get something out to you later so that we can take our friendship to the next level. And I just want you to know that you can trust me, Okako said, and Aizawa was listening to this as well. But from his perspective, he saw Izuku's pensive look as well as his damn near tear-filled eyes as he shook his head as he breathed in slowly. Uraraka-san, we need to stop what is happening with each other. I know that you are just being my friend just because someone told you to. You don't have to pretend anymore, Izuku said, as he placed Aizawa's head on Uraraka's lap. I have been betrayed by so many people who tried to befriend me because they just want to hurt me more. I won't let anyone else get closer to my heart, Izuku thought, as he walked away down the road. Izuku had finished talking to the detective who was on the case of finding the League of Villains. The man had just asked him about what Izuku thought about the raid, and Izuku gave him his answer and was let go. He was walking home towards the safety of his mother and apartment as he thought about the day he had, and he could immediately think about what the media would think about his actions. He had essentially killed a villain, even though that villain was technically dead. He was still responsible for the death of that specific villain, and he didn't know what to think. On one hand, he could think that him killing the creature meant to kill All Might was protecting his classmates, but on the other hand it was seen to be a murderous act. His mind was so tilt that he never noticed how his mother was fretting over him as he walked through the door until she gave him a hug. Once he felt the warmth that her hug did to him, he immediately broke down crying as he told her about the scary moment he had within the school of his dreams. When Inko told him that she would try and get him enrolled into Shiketsu if he is too afraid to go back to school in a few days, Izuku declines, telling her that he wishes to continue to learn from there, just hoping that they increase the security in order to prevent such a thing from happening again in the future. As his mother went about to make dinner for the evening, Izuku walked to the shower in order to clean the still dried blood on his body. As he hurried to scrub all the blood away from his body, leaving it red and raw from the aort, Izuku rinsed himself as he stepped out of the shower and looked at his body in the mirror. Scars as far as the eye could see were well placed on Izuku's upper torso, as well as the Quirkless bastard scar that was handwritten on his chest, and Izuku pulled out his mother's makeup in order to cover up the masterpiece of writing. As soon as he was finished, he exited the shower and headed towards the kitchen and found his mother setting up the plates for dinner. Sitting down, he talked to his mother about his day before the villain attack and how he had managed to kill one of the villains because of the fact that he had to take care of it before it killed his sensei. He was clearly traumatized about the fact that he had to kill a villain already into his time in his school year, and his mother was a godsend in making him know that there was no other way to make sure that his sensei survived without killing it if it had. Regeneration. Izuku was walking around the shopping district as he looked at all the prices for certain food items his mother asked him to collect for her. People around him were glaring at him as he made his food choices, as they mumbled under their breath about how a Quirkless should die and not be a part of Yui Academy. He stined as he heard them talking, as he trembled slightly from anger, and they took it as fear. Once they let him alone, he bought all the things he needed for dinner that night. Yui had told everyone that for the rest of the week that there would be no school in order to let those involved in the attack recover from their experience. Izuku was walking through the mall when he found Eureka standing in front of a store that had some really good food items but were just out of his budget. He was making sure that the money he had could be spent on some new figurines, but the way she was looking at a certain food item, mochi if he remembered correctly, he decided to walk over to it and buy it. She looked at him, stunned that she was able to find him once again as he gave the item to her, and he smiled sadly at her. I know someone who doesn't have money from the look on their face. Is there something wrong with your living situation? Izuku asked, concerned. And no, I am fine, just looking at some mochi. It's just my favorite snack to eat. But thank you for buying it for me, Eureka said, as Izuku nodded. It was here that Eureka had a look of realization dawn on her face as she squealed in happiness. Yes. You finally talked without a stutter. You're finally getting used to my presence, Eureka called out happily. Eureka-san. See, calm down. Please. Why Yuri making a scene? Izuku stutters out, blushing. Sorry, we can head out now, Eureka said, as she led him to her home. It was a shabby building that looked like it was about to fall apart, and Izuku stared at her incredulously. Why, you can't be serious about this being your current home? Izuku said, stuttering at the start. Yep. I don't have enough money to live on my own within one of the high-end apartments, just enough to live in this place for free since my parents built it a few years ago. But I have to buy small amounts of food in order to keep myself from starving, Eureka said, chuckling sadly. Izuku then helped her place her mochi in the fridge before pulling her to his home, in order to allow her a safer place to rest. I can't in good conscience let you sleep in this building. It is in the worst part of Musudafo, and you would get mugged as well as robbed way too easily. Stay at my place. It has an extra room where you can keep your things, Izuku said, as he led her to his apartment. She was surprised that he was allowing her to come to his home. Not only that, but the fact that his mother was small and pudgy compared to his muscular physique. Welcome back, Izuku. Oh, it seems like you brought a friend. I am Inko Midoriya. How can I help you today? Inko asked, as she stared at Izuku's friend with a strained smile. My name is Eureka Okako, and I am a classmate of Midoriya's. I teamed up with him for our first exercise for our heroics classes on the second day of school, Eureka said, as Inko recognized How she looked. Ah. Now I remember, Izuku said that he had a cute girl. As his classmate as well as a few others. I always wanted him to have some friends, but if you girls are able to befriend him that would work. Wonders. He's never had any friends ever since he was diagnosed. Inko said, as she talked to Eureka. Izuku placed the food items away in the kitchen as Okako talked to his mother. He had also collected everything that Okako had and brought it to the spare room so that she could set it up. A few hours later, Izuku was seen in the kitchen with his mother as they prepared for dinner for 3 that evening. Izuku, I know that she needs a place to stay without having to run out of food or starve. But is there an ulterior motive to this? Inko asked, as she stared into her son's eyes. Mom, you should have seen the place her parents placed her inside of. It was an old rickety building that was built by them years ago, and it hasn't seen better days. Endeavor was the last person who broke that building down with his fire, and Okako was living there rent-free but doesn't have enough money to keep herself fed. I wanted to give her a place where she can live without having to worry about it. I just want to be the person she needs to rely on when she needs it. Izuku said, as his mother nodded her head. At least you weren't like Hisashi who only let me live here because of the fact that I was pretty and got me pregnant. I am so glad he decided to give us the house ere my divorce. Inko said, as she paid more attention to the food. I know, you were very sad that day and had to look for a job in order to pay for the bills since Dad wouldn't do it anymore. I just want Eureka to sleep in a building that won't ever get blown to smithereens as well as burned to the ground. Izuku said, as he focused on his task of cutting some meat. Once the meat was finished, he gave the meat to his mother as she prepared the rest of dinner as Izuku sat in the living room as he pulled out a notebook and watched the news. News just in. USJ was attacked and we are saying that all villains, except for the 2 who are the leading causes of it, have been captured. I know, Frank, but we really need to talk about what happened during the near end of the fight. A young boy with green hair and eyes had been seen with a lot of blood on him and it wasn't his own. We have reason to believe that he killed one of the villains in the attack and the school hasn't said anything to protect or go against him. What do you think? The woman asked, as she looked at her cohort. Well, personally based on some information that we have, he is basically quirkless from what the school board say. Well, I haven't heard of a quirkless student in years. Not since the start of the age of quirks. The man said, as the woman continued. Based on witness accounts, we have some students who talked about the green-haired boy wishing to enter the heroics course through underground heroics. Him killing an unknown creature that was alive with only a knife to the brain multiple times, and that isn't all. Apparently he landed multiple blows to the creature that were clearly fatal. The woman said, as Izuku watched the program in horror. He killed one of the villains, right? Well, wouldn't that be classified as villainous? A hero certainly doesn't kill a villain or their opponent. They apprehend the villain in question and give them to the police. If he is out there killing his opponents, that would put him on the same field as a serial killer. The man said, as he further slandered Izuku. It was here that both news anchors had had enough of giving slander on Izuku as the man looked at his boss with an expression that was borderlining on Rage. Are you seriously having me slander a young man who is most certainly traumatized by having to do this kind of action? He yelled, before the line cut. Izuku was on the couch as his mother entered the room as she looked at his dull eyes as he was thinking, and his mouth was slowly moving as if to show that he was muttering at a very quiet level. Inko looked to the television as she looked at other channels. And each one of the media were slandering Izuku's name to the whole world. Inko looked at her son in shock as she watched as he slowly began to tremble at how everything was going to end. Izuku Shota was sitting in the nurse's ois of Yui Academy as he was listening to how the vultures were slandering one of his prized students. He had managed to have a student who wished to enter underground heroics just like him and actually managed to get into the heroics course through the entrance exams. So to hear that multiple media outlets were slandering Izuku's name, he got up from his bed as Joe looked and tried to get him to lay back down in order to rest as he made his way towards Nizu's ois. Upon reaching the door to his ois, Shota had slammed the door open as he saw the fur on Nizu's body start to bristle as he looked at Shota with the same gaze he had. They had a future hero to save from the world of slander. A few hours later, Nizu announced that he would be making an announcement to the entire world about the incident. And he had mentioned that it will in fact involve the young student in Izuku's class. And how he killed one of the villains. As soon as everything was set up and prepared for Nizu to begin, a multitude of reporters had bombarded them with questions. What are your thoughts on the young student killing a villain? What is the name of the vile student who killed an innocent life? Why aren't you getting rid of that quirkless student? It was all coming to a head when Nizu merely smiled at them. As he stared at the reporter who aptly said that Izuku's quirklessness should have been involved. Are you trying to imply that I should get rid of a potentially great hero student all because he is quirkless? Because if you are, I will have your license stripped from you for quirkless discrimination as well as slander. That goes for the rest of you as well. Nizu said, as Izuku showed up on stage. My name is Izuku Shota, and I am his teacher that was present for the attack. I was unconscious at the time, but the creature that nearly killed me was already dead. The monster was experimented on and given a new life, and it was tortured to gain additional quirks. My student prevented it from harming another student or perhaps another teacher had they arrived on the scene with my co-workers. My student is a hero as of right now, because he has the heart of one. It doesn't take a quirk in order to become a hero. It takes heart, determination to never give up, as well as the mind in order to outwit your opponent. Sometimes even I find it difficult to discern whether or not a person can become a hero without a quirk, but from what I've seen on his training, he deserves to be in my class, and I will raise him to be a great hero. Izuku said, as Nizu began to speak. As of right now, all of my school students are spending time at their homes with their respective families. So please do not go near them and harass them, or they will call the police and file a complaint on you all. Now as for the foreseeable future, the sports festival will still be held in order to give a show of force that we weren't all that injured from this attack. And those of you who wish to televise it, make sure that you don't keep your bosses waiting. Nizu said, as he and Izuku left the stage as they awaited the rest of the week to continue on with school life without much change. Izuku sat down in his classroom ere making it to class today as he waited for their teacher or substitute teacher to tell them about the day they will be having. But within the last few minutes of the morning, before homeroom, Itza had arrived telling everyone to get in their seats. As the teacher makes their way over, as everyone tell him that he was the only one who was standing, Izuku thinks about what had happened at the USJ, and definitely believes that he should speak to Hound Dog about his experience. But his thought processing was interrupted by their teacher entering the doorway with bandages covering most of his body as well as face. "Morning class, thank you for being quiet at the start of the day. Now before you say anything, we will be asking you that if you need to talk about your experience with the USJ, we have a guidance counselor in order to help you mentally. But that isn't all that is to be said today. Your fight isn't over," Izawa said, as everyone got immediately tensed as they thought about what was happening. "What if there's more villains? Will we be expelled for this? Does my smile sparkle like my cape? You will have to prepare yourselves for the UA Sports Festival," Izawa said, as he sat down at his desk. "That is completely normal." The entire class minus Izuku, Katsuki and Shoto call out incredulously. The day would continue further as Izuku prepares for the sports festival mentally as well as physically. He was in his last class of the day as he was doing some light sparring with some of his classmates in Quirkless combat. Izawa had this class exercise set up because of the fact that some opponents might take away a hero's ability to use their quirk and they'd need to learn how to fight quirkless. Izuku didn't want to take part in the sports festival since he was going to go underground in terms of heroics. He had talked to Izawa about what he was planning, and the man agreed to it so long as he took part in the first stage of the festival. So he was walking around the gym as he was looking for an opponent to spar against when he came up to Ajiro Mashirao. "Hey Midoriya, you looking for an opponent?" Ajiro asked, curiously. "Yeah, just needed someone who will use any and all abilities they have in order to increase my ability to increase my own experience," Izuku said, as he looked at the boy. They got into a fighting stance as they prepared to fight Quirkless, and Izawa watched as Izuku sparred with Ajiro. From what he saw, Izuku was outpacing Ajiro as well as beating him with his pure technique in fighting. Izawa kept his eye on Izuku for the simple fact that he was proficient in martial arts and was noticing a large number of horrible forms in the moves he was doing. Some of them were the LE foot farther back than it should, the LE hand had the thumb inside the fist, and others. He would make sure that Izuku could use his strength without breaking a body part unintentionally, and he would train Izuku how to use weaponry in the future. It wasn't long ere that the class was over and everyone was sent to go home to their families, and Izuku moved towards the school guidance counselor's office in order to talk to him. On his way he ran into another girl from his class who seemed to have the same idea as him. She had long seaweed-colored hair that ran straight down her back to her rear. She was frog-like in appearance as she was very blunt from what he remembered her talking about on the ride to the USJ. "Midoriya-chan, how are you today?" the girl asked. Who are you again? I haven't paid any attention to who my classmates are, so Could I know who you are first? I apologize if it hurts you that I don't know you, Izuku said, as the girl nodded her head. Don't worry. Midoriya-chan, we barely talk to each other, so that isn't that far-fetched. My name is Tsuyu Ajui, but call me Tsu. Tsuyu said, as Izuku nodded, albeit a little nervous. Well, Tsu, what are you doing going in this direction? Izuku asked, stuttering for a start. Well, I came here to talk to the school's guidance counselor. Something bad happened in the USJ and I was nearly killed because of it. I still have a hard time sleeping at night because of it. What about you? Tsu asked, curious. I haven't gotten enough sleep as well. I keep thinking about that villain who sent that monster against our teacher, and the monster that Ika killed. Izuku said, looking more and more scared by the second. There was no way to know that it wasn't fully alive. Midoriya-chan. You did what was necessary in order to protect your classmates and teacher. You shouldn't feel guilty about taking the life of a monster created to kill. All Might. Tsu said, as Izuku looked to the ground to think. I will think about it. But do you want to go first? Izuku asked, as Tsu looked at him. It seems like you are incredibly disturbed by what happened at the USJ, particularly the fact you had to kill already. So I personally believe that you should talk first. It might help you faster talking to the guidance counselor. Tsu said, as Izuku nodded and apologized for going first. Izuku sat in the voice of the school guidance counselor. He was a tall man. As tall as All Might almost, and had fur around his neck as a mane. He had a muzzle over his mouth as he had the features of a lion as he stared at Izuku with a calming aura. Well, Midoriya, you were the last person I would have thought would come to me about something important. What do you need to talk about? The man asked. Why, your hound dog. I am such a big fan of heroes, but I would like to get your autograph first before talking, Izuku said, pulling out a notebook. The hero nodded his head, as he took the book in his hands and looked at the page that was set to his own and looked over at the notes. They were notes on his quirk as well as fighting style and what he has achieved in his time as a hero. These notes are incredible. And you're sure you don't have a quirk? Young man Hound Dog asked, curiously. Why, yeah, I don't show my notes to everyone. They usually get destroyed before I could ask people for quirk information, Izuku said, chuckling sadly. Well, I believe that you deserve more praise for something like this. You cultivated more mental power in order to learn about quirks than most at a very young age, it seems. Here you go, Hound Dog said, signing the paper. So, I have been not sleeping as much since the USJ. Izuku started as Hound Dog nodded his head. Recording their talk. It's been like this since the moment I found out that the Noma was a living being. I've been thinking about whether or not it used to be human or was bioengineered based on dead bodies, Izuku said, as Hound Dog looked at him. So you believe that you murdered an innocent life inside the body of the Nomu? Hound Dog asked, curious. Why, yeah. I also saw what the N News thinks of me. It further makes my decision to undergo underground heroics a foregone conclusion, Izuku said, as Hound Dog nods his head. Going underground heroics is a good area to begin your life as a hero. You will Meet those kinds of villains who will kill you if they can, but at the same time, from what it sounds like you have already met the world's worst it. Can you? Hound Dog asked, concerned. At Izuku's nod, he shakes his head as he asked one more question. How is your home life? I know this might sound a little accusatory, but I need to know if your life at home is as safe for you as possible. Hound Dog said, as Izuku nodded his head. My life in my home with my mother is as safe as can be. She encouraged me to become Japan's first quirkless hero, and she helped me get to where I am today. Weren't it for her, I wouldn't be here, Izuku said, as Hound Dog nodded. Well, I guess I can say sorry for saying such accusatory questions. Now, how was your school life before you? Hound Dog asked, as Izuku clammed up. I don't know what you're talking about, Izuku said, as he immediately left the room. Nizu, we have a code green, Hound Dog said ominously. I see. Make sure to tell me what happened at the end of yours and young Midoriya's conversation, Nizu said, on the intercom in the guidance counselor's voice. Will do. Now Azui, you can come in, Hound Dog said, as she walked in with a worried expression. What happened to Midoriya? She asked worriedly. Izuku was running out of the school as he made his way home. He couldn't believe that his guidance counselor asked him that kind of question. Of course, he wouldn't talk about it. It was fine, right? It was fine to be bullied all throughout childhood and into adulthood, right? There was nothing wrong with what happened in his previous schools. He was being shown his place on the totem board of life. His place was beneath everyone who had a quirk less than human. He wouldn't let this cause him distress though, so hiding in the park he calmed his fearful heart as he walked the rest of the way back home. Izuku was right in front of his home when he was grabbed from behind and pulled into an alleyway next to his home, and he was brought face to face to Katsuki. He hadn't heard from the boy in a couple days since the attack, and the look on his face said that he was going to take his rage out on Izuku. You must think you're hot shit now, don't you? Katsuki said, as he used a powerful right hook with an explosion on Izuku's face, sending the poor boy to the ground. Izuku slowly got back up with an already blackened eye as Katsuki had then sent an explosive punch to Izuku's gut, sending him back onto the ground. Well, look at you. You can't even stand against me. What makes you think that you can defeat a creature that could kill All Might? I am supposed to be the greatest, not you. Katsuki screamed as he punched and kicked Izuku until the boy was almost unconscious from the beating. As soon as the beating was done, however, he saw Izuku's beaten form as it was shivering from pain as he looked at Katsuki with a fear that borderlined on instinctual fear. You show your face back in class tomorrow, I will be sure to make your pain from tonight far worse, Katsuki said, as Izuku got up from the ground. I will not give up on my dream, Izuku said, causing the boy to stop walking away and look back. I gave you every chance to change your attitude at UA. I gave you every chance to make sure that you could make amends with my family and become friends again. But it seems like even my patience can be run dry, Katsuki, Izuku said as the boy noticeably flinched. What did you just call me? Katsuki asked, angered. I called you by your name. Seems fitting, I've known you since we were kids. I only ever used that nickname because I thought that I could have the fun, brash, and somewhat kind in his own way kind of friend back. I have been waiting for 10 long years, Katsuki. I have been waiting for 10 years for the old friend that I used to have to come back. Izuku said, as he started to cry as he fell to his knees. I miss the old you so much. But it just seems impossible to bring him back. I can't stay with you any longer or stick by your side if all you do is just cast me aside like our promise as kids was nothing. Izuku said, as he stood back up, tears in his eyes as he walked home. Katsuki stood there. As he was thinking about what Izuku had just told him, he followed him. Only because of that stupid promise. Well, he shouldn't have been Quirkless, then he would have stayed near him. But if he was, would he have kept his promise? Katsuki would walk home with those thoughts on his mind. Entering his home, Izuku could be seen by the mirror of his home. He looked like shit, but from what it looked like his mother wasn't home. And he ran towards the shower and got into it. Taking a long hot shower, he washed away all the blood on him as he let it comfort his sore muscles as well as inflamed new scars. Coming out of the shower, he never noticed something was wrong with him as he sat on his bed and fell asleep faster than he ever did before. The next morning came by, and he was awakened by his alarm clock as he turned it and did his normal morning run around the block. Once he arrived back at home, though he wasn't feeling as well as he should have, he got his clothes on as he prepared to leave for school when his mother caught him leaving. Have a good day, sweetie, Inko said, as Izuku wished her a good day as well. Unknown to either of them, this would be the last time either would be capable of saying goodbye to one another.